to commit to mastery, we need to have a sustainable growth arc. And that sustainable growth arc with as much progression and agitation for growth that you can have requires a base of well-being for higher performance. Microsoft's purpose is in service of your purpose.
And again, 2024 is the year that partners come out as the leading edge of the spear on finding this buyer intent.
You show up to every meeting and demonstrate why you are relevant.
Every day I have to force myself to make sure that I'm taking one step ahead in terms of my own learning.
That flywheel of success is where you will build momentum, and that momentum will continue, and then you feed into the other systems to say, this is what we did, this is how we did it together.
Mike, I feel so privileged to be here in this studio with you. I mean, this is incredible.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to be here with you. So thank you for coming in.
So great to be here in LA. We have a long history. We've known each other for many years. This is your 5th appearance on Ultimate Guide to Partner.
Oh, gosh.
You're our holiday special. I mean,
That's great.
It's like you're my gift back to our community.
Great.
Especially around this topic of mindfulness, high performance psychology. We don't talk enough about it in the world that we live in, at least the world that I live in, which is the world of technology partnerships and how organizations can achieve their greatest results through successful partnering. Most organizations spend a ton of time on tactics and maybe how do I align better with a Microsoft and other organization. But we've been seeing so much change in our world these last 5 years, these tectonic shifts that I talk about. And, you know, we've been talking transformation. If you're in the tech space, you've been talking about transformation for years, for decades, in fact. But the last 5 years have been compressed. We saw an event, COVID, that radically transformed us. Satya Nadella, who you've worked with very closely, talked about 7 years of transformation in 7 months, in fact. And I think we've become numb to it. And we spend a lot of time on performance, on overachieving as organizations. And in fact, when we don't overachieve, we tend to recoil and it impacts culture. And I really wanted to spend time with you today on this topic of high performance because I think everyone that's in our tech sector can really benefit from learning more about it.
Great. It's the stuff I love talking most about. So yeah.
So there had to be a seminal point here in your life, in your career. Like when did high performance become critical or important to you and become your mission?
Cool question. I'll give you in the spirit of telling some stories here, is that just bring it to life in a moment that I know was important on this trajectory. I was 15 years old. Surfing was my sport. And I was out in the water competing. And I was a good little surfer in Southern California. And the things that I could do in training or in free surfing were, I don't know, call it an 8 out of 10 on a skill level, 10 being world class. And I'll call it 7 out of 10. I was only 16. And then come competition day, I was able to express a 3 out of 10. So I had this delta, I had this capability to do something really well. And then when the pressure was on, I couldn't access it. So it was far worse, if you will, come competition day. My physical training didn't change. My technical skills didn't change. There was one thing that changed. And what happened was it was a beautiful morning. There was 3 surfers in the water. It was about head high. Conditions were amazing. There's people loaded up on the beach, judges and friends and family. And it's what every surfer wants, is this unpacked lineup, just you and a couple other friends, and with great waves. And I was a disaster. I had no feeling in my feet. I had no connection to my body. I was up in my head thinking about all the things that could go wrong. And one of my competitors that was much older than me, he paddled by me as we're competing together. And he doesn't stop and kind of make eye contact or anything. He just paddles by and he says, "Gervais, I surf with you out here all the time. You got to stop thinking about all the things that could go wrong." And he paddled by. And I thought, oh my God, how does he know? Obviously, he could see himself in me. Like I was a mess. And like a good competitor, he didn't tell me what to do. but he pointed out what I was doing wrong. But he was right. And so in that moment, as a 16-year-old kid, I had a near lightning bolt moment where I was like, oh, it's in my head. It's only what I'm thinking about. So I had no skills. It was just a creative moment where I said, well, let me flip it and let me start thinking about what I'd like to have happen. And it had nothing to do with the people on the beach. It had to do, because that's what I was worried about, is that what are they going to think of me when I fall, if I come in last? What is the most consequential thing in this environment was not getting hurt. It was what they would think. And it was the emotional hurt of looking stupid and letting people down or all that stuff. And so I just flipped it on its head and I started to think about what I wanted to experience and what I wanted to have happen. And it was a simple little recipe. I wanted to be connected to what I was doing. And that was the impetus. Like, what just happened? What is this thing? What is this power that I didn't understand about how I think would directly stitch to how I live and how I do anything? So it set me down the path to understand what is psychology, and come to find out I really needed it, so that just led me to want to study how the greats use their mind. And that's really what high performance psychology is. It's the science of how the best in the world use their minds to be their very best.
Yeah. And you've worked with Olympic athletes, the Seattle Seahawks, right?
Yeah.
2 Super Bowl appearances.
2 Super Bowls, yeah.
And leading corporations, right? And so we got to meet each other back when I was at Microsoft and you were working with Microsoft. It was a pretty cool experience.
It was great, yeah.
And, I want to go back there for a moment, maybe, this collaboration with high performance. And what I'm really hoping to uncover from you is, like, how did you transfer it from sports to business?
My first commitment was to really understand how the mind works under pressure and stress. And I'm classically trained as a psychologist, specialization in sport and high performance, and a subspecialty in consequential environments. That's what I needed to go understand. That was my working laboratory. And so I was doing projects where if people made mistakes, the most dire of consequences would take place. They would lose a limb, lose a life. Their friends could lose limbs and lives. And real trauma was on the other side of mistake making, which creates this beautiful working laboratory to make sure that you are fundamentally committed to mastering your craft, to mastering your body, and to mastering your mind. And so those frontier pushing, avant-garde expressing performers had to get it right. And so that's a perfect laboratory for understanding how the mind works and how they train their minds to go operate in those environments. For example, like the Red Bull Stratos project is one of those projects. Felix Baumgartner had this idea, and this idea was, I want to see if I can break the sound barrier. If I can jump from such a high place in the world that I could travel at the speed of sound. And come to find out, you'd have to go up about 130,000 feet to do that, which is the edge of the stratosphere. So in those environments, you've got to be quote unquote right. And so he did all this mental training work so that he could have command of his mind in what we would consider one of the most hostile, dangerous environments, the edge of space. So that's where I got to spend my time to really understand it. Now, it gets really simple in those environments. It can't be overly complex. And so now you're distilling down to first principles and best practices, because you're not working in a fluffy area with those types of folks. Like, first principles, best practices. And from that, I was able to translate into business what the first principles and best practices are from a science-based and a frontier-informed set of insights. And I would love to share some of those with you. It's not complicated.
And I think about Felix and jumping out of a plane or whatever craft it was.
Yeah, well, it was a balloon and a capsule, like a huge, what looks like a hot air balloon, but imagine like 5 times or 15 times bigger. I don't know exactly how big it was, but a huge hot air balloon with a capsule that he and about 8 other people built.
And corporate world feels very much like that, right? I mean, you're up on stage, you're in a board meeting, You're in front of Wall Street and you're driving this high pressure, high stakes game, right? Which is business. And you may not be prepared for it, right? Things are happening. And this is why I come back to the tectonic shifts, right? So I'd love for you to translate how that works across from this high pressure sports situation to a high pressure business situation.
There's a challenge in some of the crosswalk. And some of the challenges, like when you make mistakes in business, usually they're not so catastrophic that people are going to die. Now people can lose their jobs and livelihoods, and there's lots of things that could go radically wrong when you make business decisions, especially in the entrepreneur field. But so where it falls apart is that the stakes are slightly different, more esoteric, sometimes less concrete. And then the other piece is that in sport, there's an off season and there's a lot of time to prepare. In business, it's like we're running ultra marathons back to back to back to back. And the time to prepare is not as crisp and clean. In sport, there are coaches that are observing everything that you do and don't do to help you be your very best. So there's, let's call it, one nutritionist for just a handful of athletes, one sports psychologist for a handful of athletes, one technical coach for a handful of athletes, one strategist for just a handful of athletes. And their job is to have a high cadence, high performance feedback loop. In business, we don't have that. We don't know if the email that we wrote was excellent or just good. We don't know if the cadence of our communication is excellent, world class, or just good. We don't know how we're showing up in meetings, if we're excellent. It's almost like left to the individual performer in business to figure out what great looks like and what are the capabilities to invest every day in. And I'm not mad at this scenario we're in, but it's really frustrating. And it's frustrating because I spent 25 years working with world's best, forward pushing sport organizations, and their product is their people. That is the number one thing that they invest in. And when their people are physically, technically, strategically, and mentally rock solid, the product is beautiful. It's amazing. It's artistic. It's masterful, whether it's catching a ball or, swiping a brush on a canvas, whatever it might be. And in business, we stay with tactics and strategy. And then we go to tactics and strategy. And then we go to problem solving for tactics and strategy. And very little is sophisticated in the investment in the internal capabilities to be great. And those same internal capabilities to be great, and I'm going to be very concrete here in a moment, those internal capabilities are the same internal capabilities to live a great life.
Yes.
So from sport to business, from sport and business to living a great life, that crosswalk is really interesting to me. So let's stay with high performance business for just a moment. In this tectonic shifting that is taking place, to use your framing, there's a bit of a sleight of hand that I want to make sure I'm bringing my attention to, is that we talk about unprecedented times of change. Okay. When you strip it right down to a first principle in life, each moment is brand new. And I'm not going to hug a tree and say, oh, just be present. Okay, but each moment is uniquely, in and of itself, fresh and new. So this moment is always changed. It's always different. There's an unfolding, unpredictable, unknown about this moment, which means that there's change from this moment to the next. And if you want to be great with a tectonic big shift in change, we must train ourselves to be good with this fragile moment that's shifting to the next moment. So that more microscopic art of change.
So we need to operate in the moment that we're in as opposed to living in the past or thinking about the future.
And one more turn of the screw here is it's a yes, and there's an and in here, which is when you're in the present moment, it doesn't mean you're great. It just means you're in it.
Right.
So that's like a sufficient skill to be in the present moment. But it's not enough. It's how do you contour your attention? How do you direct your skill set towards what matters most to you in this moment? So there's another turn of the screw that it's great that we're talking about being present. Awesome. That is where high performance is expressed. It's where wisdom is revealed. It's where relationships are experienced. It's the playing ground. Okay. But it's not enough, because if you don't know how to work with your psychological skills, if you don't know how to work with your own mind in this moment, we're just still kind of just getting through it. So there's another turn of the screw, and that's where the greats have said, hey, Mike, I want to be great at living, or I want to be great at this thing. My life depends on it, or like this really matters to me. What do you got? I say, oh, well, let's train. What do you say? You want to train being more calm? Yeah. Because I get keyed up, man. When like it gets big, I get, whew, like I got a rattle in me when it gets heavy. Okay, good. Do you want to train confidence? Yeah. Can you train confidence? Oh yeah. You're already really confident, but like, do you think a little bit more would be good? Oh yeah. Like I want to be rock solid on knowing how to speak to myself, how to back myself up. Good. How about a recovery program, so that you're not like quick to temper, quick to frustration, that you're more eloquent in working with people in high heat moments? Yeah, that'd be really good. And. Okay, so focus and self-trust and calm and confidence and optimism, pre-performance routines, post-recovery scenarios, those are all trainable skills that the best in the world are showing us how they do it. And science and laboratories are hardening those to say, yeah, these hold up. So that's where I get to spend most of my time.
Very cool. And we divorce some of this from business, right? We think about this as maybe health related. We don't bring it into the room in the corporate world in a way, but you did, in fact. And I want to come back to a time when you got to work with us when I was part of the pilot program. I remember you walking around the room that day, and we were like in small groups, and you were walking around and checking in on us. And you said, hey, yeah, I'm going to be meeting with Satya Nadella next week, like first time, right? You hadn't worked with the leadership team.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we were already I think we were in Northern Virginia at a really nice resort doing this thing that we were doing around high performance with you. And then, fast forward now, right? It's over 10 years, I think it's been. Has it been 10 years?
It has, yeah.
And Microsoft was at a very different point in time, but Satya seemed to embrace what you were doing in a big way. And I thought maybe you'd spend a few moments here, because a lot of what you just mentioned from a personal performance, he took into the corporation, and he asked you to help him align it to his executive team, his leadership team, and embrace around this big mission, their vision for Microsoft at the time. I thought maybe you'd spend a moment there, because I think it sets us up for the rest of the conversation.
So Satya is, I think, one of, if not the most meaningful CEOs of our time right now. So, and I don't say that because of the working relationship, but the way that he values the human experience and the solution/product. And he's not wanting to extract the best out of people for Wall Street or for a better product. He is fundamentally committed to invest in his people in a way that I hadn't seen before. And so when we first sat down, the idea was, how do we create, for the 224,000 people at Microsoft, how do we create an experience for them while they're here that they will feel like this was an incredibly enriching part of their life, maybe the most meaningful part of their professional career? Like, how do we create that environment? And the simple reflective answer was like, let's invest in their psychological well-being for greater performance. Okay, so wait, how do those two things cross? I want to introduce a phrase, which is high performance well-being.
High performance well-being. What does that mean?
So it's not we used to believe that high performance began where wellness ended. And that was something we all swallowed in the elite sport world. You really want to be a high performer? Hey, there's some sacrifices that you have to make. Like, are you really up for it? We were wrong. We were flat out wrong. And high performance well-being, the combination of those two words, is the intersection that I'm most fascinated by. To commit to mastery, we need to have a sustainable growth arc. And that sustainable growth arc, with as much progression and agitation for growth that you can have, requires a base of well-being for higher performance.
And what does that base consist of?
It's basic recovery, connections with other people, and mindfulness a la awareness practices. So that's kind of the base of awareness. We are majoring in the minors, if you will, for much of the best practices for people to be better. So what do I mean by that? The big rocks are the major components. Eating right. I mean, it's not cool, to get the salad with the light vinaigrette or whatever, and while everyone else is grabbing like the really tasty stuff. You've got to be really committed in those moments because you want something. Sleep. There's so much I want out of life. There's so much that you want out of life, but shutting it down to get your 7.4 hours or your 8.2 or whatever the amount of hours that suits you well, it's a really important, difficult thing to get in a world that is on, and your second shift starts at like 8:45, because you haven't answered an email yet because you've been jammed with meetings and preparing for the family, meals or whatever it might be, and trying to get a little gym time in. And the third variable is making sure that your carriage is fit to manage the stress required to live a great life. And then the last practice is to knowing how to use your mind to eloquently adjust to all the curveballs that come up in life. And so those are the big rocks for well-being. And then you can layer on top of it the psychology for high performance. And so I didn't answer your question about Satya, but he wanted to make a fundamental commitment to helping people know how to use their mind well. They're already really smart. Intellectual horsepower, as you know, is through the roof. They're systems thinkers. They're trying to solve complicated stuff. It's a complicated internal ecosystem. They are truly the multinational of multinationals.
Right.
And so he said, right, but we need to go from know-it-all to learn-it-all. We need to know how to use our mind to be great learners. And if you want to have any type of culture, you can put in any fancy words. Satya chose growth mindset. You want any of those fancy words that matter to you and your organization, my proposition is you must train people's minds to deal with the stress that comes with that aspiration. Because it's under the moments of stress that we find out what we're really made of.
Yep, I agree.
Do we become prickly, scratchy, irritated, intolerant, frustrated, or do we stay graceful? Do we stay connected? Do we stay in a learning mindset, in a solution mode? And if you don't have the psychological skills to stay in those high heat moments well, people will never know what they're capable of, is kind of an easy idea, I think, to understand.
If you're part of the movement, you know I have a very strong point of view. I've sat on both sides of the table for over 30 years now. I built growth through partnerships in PC, internet, cloud, mobile, AI, marketplaces, and more. I've also seen the demise of organizations that are resistant to change. I'm part of the communities, special interest groups, and associations, and I don't see one place that mirrors the ecosystem and brings it all together. You see, I see a vibrant world where hyperscalers, builders, ISV sellers, SIs, MSPs, and other partners come together to spark the ecosystem's growth. I've talked to many of you, and what I continually hear is it's noisy, I don't know whom to listen to, and where to go. There's a massive opportunity, but I'm not sure how to get there. Well, you've been heard. We're getting ready to open the doors early to pilot this new experience. We want this to be your place, with your feedback and participation. If you're a builder, an innovator, or a leader. Visit our website.
And this was a room filled with alpha leaders.
Oh, so now you're talking about working with Satya's leadership
Oh,
team?
I want to come back here because I think it's
Yeah.
a great example as I look across even the 500,000 Microsoft partners in the world.
Amazing.
Some that are large, big organizations like Cisco and others, and then the smallest organizations, but a CEO who's maybe driven on driving a business forward, maybe has 100 employees, still has that high stress environment. You have to have a certain amount of ego in order to operate in those environments, right? In order to get to a certain level. So you have an alpha personality, you have something that's driving you. But you mentioned something earlier about not having that 360, not having that view. Was the email good or great? I would say, was the email really bad? Or was the situation and the culture toxic, right? And how do you move from that to great, to high performance?
Yeah. So I think if we kind of zoom out for a moment, the idea is if you really want to create something special, you've got to invest in your people in a systematic, thoughtful way that meets them where they are and can help them understand that these skills will help you be the person that you want to be more often. And when you do that, you're going to have this sense of flourishing and high performance that goes with it. So it was the grand experiment, I think, to cascade psychological skills training inside the rhythm of business.
And what did that look like?
Well, let's use sport for an example for just a moment. 25 years ago, my first job in pro sport, coach and GM are like, right, let's figure this out.
Yep.
And so it was hockey. There was about 20 some athletes, probably 8 coaches, something like that. And they valued psychology. They intimately understood that if we're going to be great, we need to be mentally tough. We need to, really what that is optimistic. Even when it's hard to be optimistic, that's what mental toughness for the most part is. And so how do we train it? When I ask them, what are you doing for, training your athletes? They go, oh, well, there was a sports psych across town that, that we would send people to, but now we have you here. I said, well, what have you been doing though? Like, what is the mental training if you value it so much? Nothing. Okay. So it was adjacent to the building. Now there's somebody in the building and that's great, but there's no time allocated for it. The agenda is set. And so there was, 90 minutes for skating, 45 minutes for lifting, X number of minutes for rehab, and some X number of minutes for film. Day's done. They couldn't find a way to add more time to the day for mental skills training, even though they believed that it was somewhere between 75 and 90% of the success of the team is mental skills on board, but they couldn't find more time for it. Now, fast forward to sport now, what's happening is and big sport is about 10 years ahead of big business, is that sports psychology is inside the rhythm of business. So mental imagery is not something to do at night. It's not something that competes with Xbox or, dinner with your children. Mental imagery happens during the working days. We're not carving out more time. We're being better disciplined with the time we have, and we're folding it into the rhythm of business. Let me explain that. One more kind of click of the turn here is that in the business world, it would look as simple as something that is structured and thoughtful and is about 30 seconds to maybe 3 minutes every meeting. You say, what? Every meeting that you have, every meeting as a leader, this is what when we project out what modern business is going to look like in the next 5 years, let's say, is that what is the main problem for most organizations is the relationships that people have with themselves and with each other. It's most of the friction inside of businesses. Why is that the case? Rapid change has happened and we haven't backfilled the psychological skills for those better relationships.
Exactly.
Okay. So what's the remedy? Is not to take people away for a 4-day offsite and have a keynote speaker come in and talk about the power of relationships or like how to be.
And go drinking at night and like
wake up
stay out.
exhausted.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not it. It's fun at some levels, but it's not it. It's a sustainable program, just like an elite sport, that every day leadership and their chiefs of staff are committed to these easy, simple little, but yet research-backed practices that teams can do together to train psychological skills. And of course, there's going to be some stuff that people need to do on their own. But we're not suggesting to elite athletes now to do imagery at night. We're folding it in 30 seconds to 3 minutes at the top of a meeting.
And what does imagery look like? Is it visualization about what the future state looks like?
Yeah, it's I'll give you a more concrete example. And this is how we do it in elite sport. Head coach gives holds court for, I don't know, like 10 minutes to sometimes 30 minutes. So the entire organization, all the coaches, staff, and athletes meet for, like I said, that amount of time on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There's no off days. Okay. Tuesday, there's a little bit of downtime in football. Okay. And he or she would say something like, look, confidence is the cornerstone. That's a very tight phrase. Confidence is the cornerstone for great performance. This week, today, let's be great. We've already talked about how to train confidence. So there's all this pre-work that's been done, educational work, okay? Today, let's be great on how we speak to ourselves. Matter of fact, let's be the best in the world at it. The way you speak to yourself in this meeting for the next 45 minutes, back yourself, be great, da-da-da-da. When you get on the field, be great with the way that you speak to yourself. Matter of fact, coach each other on how you're speaking. Build each other. So it's that kind of simple. Then the head coach, the team breaks off into offensive team and the defensive team. So about 50 some go in one room and the other 50 in another room. And the offensive and defensive coordinators, then they relay that same message on confidence in their own way. And they say, right, boys, I'm talking football. We're talking about confidence this week, right? So look, you heard coach, be great now. Be great with the way you speak to yourself. And if you're not sure, Johnny, I know you're new on the team. If you're not sure what that means, get with somebody, right? And everyone here should have their statements written down, their epic thoughts that build them written down. Johnny, if you don't know what that is, get with somebody. And if they don't know how to explain it to you, let me know because they need to know it.
So these incantations, this is amazing. Speaking to yourself, I don't think we think about it in the corporate world at all.
Oh yeah, I mean, you are your coach.
Yeah. And so what are you saying to yourself, right? Because your mind is talking to you all the time.
No, you are framing things all the time. So your mind is not this thing that's just talking to you. You're an active agent in how you're doing calculus about your internal skills relative to the external demands. And you are sorting that calculus out all the time. It's multifaceted, it's super dimensional. But essentially, you are framing an experience out that's happening, and you're quickly mapping it against your internal skill set. And that mapping against the internal skill set is a skill. And the assessment of the external event that's taking place is a skill. Why do I say those both are skills? Because they can be developed and enhanced. Left unchecked, your brain will look outside of your body and will first work to identify all the dangers and the risks, all the things that could go sideways or wrong or potential threats. That's what your brain is supposed to do. When you train your mind, your brain goes, oh, I don't always have to find all the dangers. Oh, I can look for opportunities. Oh, wait, I could frame this as a challenge, as an opportunity rather than as a threat or a fear-based thing. Oh, so the way I shape what's happening around me is a skill I can develop. Let me be great at that. Let me go to work. That's what a rite of passage to living a great life. That is a rite of passage to know how to frame things well so that you're not always feeling like you're just barely keeping up with the threats around you. And then knowing how to speak to yourself about your internal skills is also something you can get better at. And so that's, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine how I would go through life not having invested in those two very, 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 very basic skills.
So how do you bring those into business? I get the sports analogy for sure, right? I mean, I'm a running back. I have a certain, I'm feeding myself a certain, well, I've got training associated with it. I've got a psychological framework I've established. I've got all the training and tools. Like I said, we're 10 years ahead of business. How do you take it into the boardroom or into the office environment?
Well, the work we did with Satya's team, which he has publicly shared quite a bit about, is we start with the big rocks and we say, right, you guys brought in a big consulting firm, you thought about it deeply, you know the company's purpose. What is your purpose? And Satya had this brilliant insight. He says, I want Microsoft, we know our purpose. I want Microsoft to also be in service of the purpose of each individual employee here. So that means we all need to know our purpose and be in service of each other's purpose. So Microsoft is a platform, and it's a platform for you to live a great life, not just to sell and connect, software bundles, but like a platform for you to live. So can you figure out first what your purpose is and how Microsoft can support your purpose and how you can support Microsoft purpose? Now we have a partnership. It's the ultimate partnership that he's sitting right in the middle of. And it's an insight that I have never heard any head coach nor any CEO speak directly to the heart of the relationship between the corporation's purpose or the enterprise's purpose and the individuals that make up that enterprise, and finding a synergy between those two.
So Microsoft's purpose is in service of your purpose, and you're also helping each of these individuals in the room understand what their purpose is, or maybe
slight shift here. So Microsoft's purpose really is to help every person and organization on the planet
to achieve more.
Yeah. Okay. That's why they exist. Okay. Then Satya says, Susie, what's yours? What's your purpose?
Yeah.
And Susie says, I don't know. And then he says, right, get with finding mastery. Okay. So I'm shorthanding a lot here.
We all discovered our personal philosophy or mission. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, do the work with finding mastery, because what I want from us is to figure out, you're here to help Microsoft's purpose, but how can Microsoft's purpose to help people achieve more, to do more and to be more, how can this work both ways? So it's the subtle art of the purpose. It's the demonstrative purpose is well written and clearly articulated, but the subtlety here of the culture is like, let's see how we can help each other grow. That art and that nuance only comes from somebody who really understands from an empathetic framework what it's like to possibly be you. So he's grounded in empathy. And he talked about that on the Finding Mastery podcast, that is one of his first principles. And that just means I have a sense of what it's like to be you in this world. And
he didn't come from an empathetic place, right? I think he tells that story. I think he was put in a situation, whether he was put in a situation or was asked this on a job interview, if there's a baby lying in the street crying, what do you do? Mm-hmm. And I think the answer he gave was not the correct answer, like pick up the baby, right?
Yeah, right.
And then he had another situation. But empathy did become a learned skill for Satya and for the leadership team.
Yeah, and Satya also has a unique family dynamic and experience that would, let's call it, be an advantage to developing empathy.
Yes.
And so, this conversation is not best served to just speak about Satya, which I think he is amazing, but what he's pointing to, which is invest in your inner life.
Yep.
And there are best practices to do that. Back to like what we did first time with him and his team is, what is your personal philosophy? In other words, what are your first principles? And until you know those, you'll never really understand your purpose. What are the first principles that are going to help articulate how you're going to go after your purpose? And so we did that work. He loved it. They loved it. And we cascade all of that type of training to the rest of the organization.
Yeah. And you did individual like you did with us because we were part of that pilot.
That's right.
Then you built out an entire course around this.
Yeah.
And so, we're not going to take everybody through the course today in this conversation, but maybe could you give us some practical advice for the leaders that are watching today on what they need to do, how to go about that? How do you develop your own personal philosophy? And how do you get to the right mindset or high performance mindset?
Okay, well, let's first talk about what a high performance mindset is. A high performance mindset is essentially having all the right skills to be in the present moment and to shape yourself in this moment to be your very best. That's what a high performing mind is. It's on time with this unfolding, unpredictable, unknown moment, and you're able to bring your very best forward. And on the Finding Mastery podcast, there's a astronaut that eloquently spoke about this. And I think he is so on the money. And I asked him, what does it mean to be your very best? And he says, oh, it's quite simple. It's like these micro decisions that I make throughout every moment of my life. Like, is this it? Is this it? It's 1,000 micro decisions each day.
That's
and you can only
fascinating.
do that if you're in the present moment. So that's what a high performing mind is. You need a whole set of skills underneath of you, psychological skills, emotional skills, to be able to, one, be aware, and two, navigate this unfolding, unpredictable moment. Okay, so that's the first. How do you do it? Wait, what was your question? How? Or was it, no, yours was about philosophy and purpose.
Philosophy and purpose, and then how do you foster a high performance mindset, or how do you create a high performance mindset?
So let's just kind of, we just define what a high performance mindset is. Philosophy and purpose. The hard part here is that nobody can give it to you.
Right.
So there's lots of purposes and philosophies that you could draw on. All 11 world religions have a set of philosophical life orientations and they have clear purposes. So the biggest movers and shakers of global culture have already done some hard work here. And you could make up your own, no problems, if you want to do that work. So what do I mean by that? A philosophy essentially is a statement or two that describes the most important principles that you're going to govern your thoughts, your words, and your actions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that sounds like a mouthful, but when we think of let's go.
I mean, I could give you mine, right?
Let's go. Let's do that.
Be a bold inspiration, share a vision of the world with others, and leave a legacy.
That is
my personal philosophy.
Say it again for me.
Be a bold inspiration, share a vision of the world with others, and leave a legacy.
Cool. So then those three main pillars, bold, vision, legacy, with the thousands of choices that you have throughout the day.
Yep.
There's something about being bold. There's something about helping others, build a vision. And there's something about making sure you're leaving something better, the legacy
Exactly.
piece. And so that when we're in this conversation, I'm sure you're trying to figure out the ways to, be bold and help elicit a vision and leave the place a little bit better. Same with when you're choosing breakfast, same with when you're getting your kids in the car if you have kids, or same when you're hosting your meeting. It's the same thing. Like, what are the first principles to help shape of all of the words and thoughts and actions you could possibly have? That philosophy is designed to do that. Your purpose is, why are you here?
Right.
And no one can give that to you either. Why are you here? And you might say, well, I think I just said my purpose. My purpose is to be bold and leave a legacy. Maybe they're eloquently lined up. I don't know. Have you squared those two?
They're aligned. So, I think there's this whole discovery process, right? I'm at a certain age right now, and it took me a long time to find it. And I think it's an intersection of maybe what you're good at, what you like doing, where you can make money, and where that aligns to being bold, having a vision, and so I've aligned it around partnerships, right? I took many years of experience doing this thing, working with partners, being pretty good at it, having built a career around it, and then also understanding intuitively, like what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And maybe some of it's so intuitive, like I just know the hair on the back of the neck that goes up when I say that's not working right. And then translating it back for others, right? And so that's how we built Ultimate Partner around that.
Yeah, there you go. So there's the alignment there.
Yeah.
So it's the clarity of it so that you could get it out under duress. You could say it when it, when the moment calls for it, and that it can also guide the thousands of choices throughout your day. that's good work to get done. You know, because
It's hard work.
it's hard work.
It's hard work.
But what happens under stress is we don't rise to the occasion. We fall to our level of training.
Yes.
And the level of training here is what matters most. The clarity, the work on the clarity of your philosophy and purpose is the level of your training. And if that's not clear, what will win is the brain's desire for survival. So what we do is we look outside of ourselves for approval. We look outside of ourselves for a potential solution that only we can really solve. And so it's a reflexive part of us to need to belong. It's beautiful. That is our human ecosystem.
Yep. Being
But-
part of the tribe, right? It's
Yep.
survival instinct as well.
Yeah, 100%. And safety means belonging. Being at the center of something is much safer than being on the fringe. Not the really interesting things happen on the fringe. Yet what happens under stress and pressure is we reflexively look outside of ourselves to see if we're okay in the eyes of others. If we haven't done the work, that's what happens. Once we've done this work that you and I are talking about, then that becomes the compass. Am I being true and honest to those three pillars of my philosophy? And if I am, keep going, keep being bold, keep helping, keep building a legacy. Like those become the tuning fork rather than the approval of others.
You mentioned something about stress entering the room. Happens to me, happens to all of us, right? And that's where the training comes in. It's great to say all these things that I've just said, but we have stress. I mean, all of us in business have stresses. Tectonic shifts create additional stresses, and how do we adapt to change? How do you deal with that? Like, how do you take what is the training that has it so that you're able to deal with those stressful environments, the stressful times, in the right way?
To oversimplify a very complicated science of psychology, it is the drilled way down to the skills. It's knowing how to manage your emotions. I'll explain that in a minute.
Yep.
And how to navigate your thoughts. So the emotional piece is really navigating your physiological state. So breathing is the big skill. That's the one more than anything else that we need is to know how to downregulate. So long exhales have been paired with safety.
Yeah.
After we ran from the wildebeest and we escaped it, what do we do? A long exhale. And so that long exhale is paired with a signal to the brain that we're okay. And if we feel keyed up because we're late on a couple of emails or we're frustrated by something or got to get a text or whatever it might be, hold on. Take a couple long exhales, like recalibrate. So exhale and self-talk are kind of the two big ones, and both require a level of awareness. And so awareness, there's 3 practices to awareness building. And without awareness, I think it's nearly impossible to navigate the present moment.
Yep.
So awareness is foundational. And there's 3 practices for awareness, according to good science. Mindfulness, a la meditation, is a great way to increase your understanding and your awareness of what's happening in your mind, in your body, in the world around you. Writing, so journaling, if you don't like meditation or mindfulness, journaling is a second. And the third is conversation with people of wisdom.
Interesting.
Yeah, because what they do is they hold up a mirror.
So are people of wisdom peers, mentors, great teachers that you read books about? I mean, they could be all the above, obviously. It's all those things.
I think
How do you think through that?
wisdom is pretty special and rare.
Yeah.
And so they tend to be connected to people that have lived contemplative lives where they're looking at how things work. So wisdom is quite simple, which is like, is this universal for all humans? Like that would be a filter for a wise person to understand the universality of a condition or of people. And they tend to be a little bit older. They tend to live really interesting lives and contemplative, like they contemplate things deeply. So they're special and rare. Could be a peer, could be, but most peers, because we're in it together, they're more maybe better performers.
Right.
Or they have a little bit better perspective. But true wisdom is a bit more special.
You know, we live in the world of partnerships, and this world means that we not only have to exist within our own corporate environment, we also have to lock arms with another organization, another person, another individual to be successful. How do we take this mindset from the individual performance of my organization, like I call it the internal victory, to now locking arms with another organization to build and sustain successful partnerships?
It's a cool question because it rests on a first principle. I shared one first principle already, which is that everything is always brand new. So that's a first principle.
Yeah.
Okay. The second first principle is that we're completely interconnected. So how do you make that kind of more, I don't know, connected to the performance world, is that nobody does it alone. We need each other. And so connection and relationships and partnerships is the heartbeat of how anything gets done in sport and business. And you think about golf. That golfer is not alone in their journey. They have lots of coaches, a support network that challenges them, that provides feedback. Like nobody does the extraordinary alone. So we need each other, and it begins with the relationship you have with yourself so that you can be great for your partners.
Mm-hmm.
The metaphor of the life vest holds true here. Know how to take care of yourself in rapids, putting your life vest on first, so that under the high heat, high rapid moment, you can be a great partner for the other person, because there's an embracing on the first principle that we need each other to go do this extraordinary thing that we think is possible. And just like a value is not yours until it's been tested and earned, you can say that I value being honesty, but when given a moment of high heat or pressure to choose the easy lie or the hard truth, and you choose the easy lie, you're not honest. And that's the same with partnerships.
Yeah.
So if you're not there in a high heat, difficult, challenging moment because you're trying to save yourself or you're just looking after your best interest, you're not a partner.
That's right.
You're something else. And we can sense that. We're actually, humans are really good at sensing that.
You know, you bring in empathy into the room for that conversation as well. And you have to treat those other organizations like you treat your own, or treat yourself.
Yeah, well, it's you know, I get a little confused by friends and family, you know, or family and friends. They're relationships. And who would you get in a foxhole for and risk a lot?
Yeah.
Those are the relationships that, like, there's ranges here, but those are the first most important relationships in your life. And then, like, there's other foxholes where you're like, well, maybe I wouldn't risk everything, but I you know, there's, okay, those are good too. Those are, you know, and then there's relationships.
More transactional.
Yeah. And then but then there's relationships like, yeah, I'm not getting in a foxhole. Like, I don't trust that person.
That's
I
right.
don't trust that organization. And so anyways, I'm not sure where I'm going here, but the idea of, like, being great so you can be great for others and knowing who those others are is amazing. It's an amazing way to go through the world.
So we're about ready to kick off 2025. Thank you for being our holiday guest this year again. A lot of people listening, viewing today, now that we do these in the studios and in your lab, which is amazing.
Thank you.
How can these leaders think about applying mastery and mindfulness in order to be more successful, in order to optimize their success going into 2025?
Well, let's put it through a simple little practical model here. For anything that we're going to get better at, there's a learn, live, and a lead. Okay.
Learn, live, and lead.
Yeah. I mean, it's super simple. You know, I'm always a little suspect of, you know, these types of, you know, models that sounds really nice to say. But so let me open it up for a moment. Like, learn about the psychological skills that you think matter most, you know, that you're wanting to invest in yourself. Could you be a little bit more calm? Could you be a little bit more focused? Could you trust yourself a little bit better? Could you fill in the blanks? Be more optimistic. Okay, so learn about the science and how people train those practices. The best in the world train them.
And you talked about journaling. You talked about mindfulness practice, meditation.
Yeah.
These
Those
are
are all
things that
some
we
of
all
them.
do, right?
Yeah, optimism training
Optimism
is a
training.
thing, you know. The Science of Three Good Things, and morning mindset routines. The ones that we help our athletes and executives work is, something like 90 seconds. And so if your folks want to learn that, we can, it's on our website somewhere. I think it's findingmastery.com is the website, but I think it's /morning mindset.
Morning mindset.
But I'll load that for you.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
We'll put that on our show notes as well.
It's a nice little simple framework. But so learn about the skills that you want to organically get better at and the best practices that would support it.
Yep.
And then train it. That's the living part. Like walk the talk. Like really train it. If you go from learning something to try to lead it, but you don't have that middle dialed in, it's a little bit like an chocolate Easter egg bunny that has nothing on the inside and you poke it and there's nothing in there. Those are leaders that we'll never really trust because they don't,
hollow.
Yeah, they don't back it up, right?
Right.
So the living is, let's say, for example, for meditation, is going a 30-day run a 30-day trial, if you will, where you're running an experiment where you're meditating, let's say 12 minutes a day.
Yep.
And you'll just be, maybe you're just 30 days ahead of somebody else. That's cool. You're just a little bit more tuned to it. So learn, live, and then you earn the right to lead other people about how to work from the inside out. This is what's coming, Vincent, is that business has extracted the best of us. High performance in sport recognized that, and they fixed it by saying, right, we need to invest in the psychological skills. That's coming in sport. The great leaders, the modern leaders are going to understand, they've already spotted it, and they're saying, how do I put how do I put psychology and psychological skills, not psychotherapy, but psychological skill building inside the rhythm of business. So I'm not the one saying, hey, on your own time, instead of spending the 15 minutes with your kid you get a day, why don't you ignore that and meditate?
Yeah.
Why don't you, out of the 6.5 hours you're sleeping, why don't you take a half hour of that, burn yourself down to 6 hours of sleep so you can meditate for no. We got to figure out how to put it in the rhythm of business. And that's what we're working on solving with Microsoft and other corporations right now.
And the link to get to your morning mindset is findingmastery.com/morning mindset.
There we go.
We can find it there. And I agree with you there I've been following a meditation practice now for close to 2 years.
I love it.
And it's made
Hold on. We met more than 2 years ago. So what happened? Like, of course you and I talked about it.
Well, you
10
and I
years
have
ago.
talked about it, and I tried and I tried and I tried, and I kept saying to myself, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, right? I reached an inflection point in my personal life. I actually gave up drinking. So this was going about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago. And somebody had suggested listening to, actually it was Joe Dispenza's work, who's just here in the seat just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I just found it calming. I just found his meditations to work for me.
Great.
And it became a regular practice. And I do it at least once a day. And sometimes I do it at night. And yes, sometimes I'll still wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning looking for the alligators in the room or whatever, the cheetah, whatever, right? Because it's that mind that we have that's kind of ingrained in our sub. And then I'll do a little meditation then, and I'll just fall back asleep again.
Brilliant.
So
there you go.
It's worked for me. I guess it's getting it into the business part of it, which I love the fact that we ingrain into the business component here.
That's a sophisticated business thought, is how do we put it inside the rhythm of business.
Yeah. And for everybody that's watching or listening to us today, I strongly urge you to try this. If you haven't done it already, I've had a lot of friends say, I can't do it. I've tried it once. It doesn't work.
Meditation we're talking
Meditation.
That's right.
Yeah. So rapid fire questions here, because we are. I mean, I'd love to sit in the seat for about 3 hours.
Me too.
But I know we can't.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'll miss my flight back to Florida. What book has influenced your work the most?
I mean, first I go with the big books. The Bible, the Gita, the Tao Te Ching. First I go with the big ones, and those are the ones that are really rich. Whatever your position on them are, the richness in those books have been around for 2,000, 5,000, like a long time. And so there's something there that's really important to pay attention to. And then the more contemporary modern books, I look at Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. The first half of that book,
great.
Is like the first half is definitely a read for all humans, not just men, of course. And then Bruce Lee's The Artist's Life is that's one that there's a takeaway from there, which is know structure to break structure, know your form to break form. And that's the artist's life, is to be grounded in first principles and know how to adjust and break to innovate and create net new for you based on your philosophy, based on your purpose, based on your unique skills. Know your structure to know how to break structure.
Fascinating. What's one habit you can't live without?
Yeah, that's a good one. Mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Yeah, the mindfulness practices. I don't know where I would be. Actually, strike that. I know what my life was like when I didn't have an awareness practice. I was highly anxious, clinically so. The world did not need another one of me in it. I was selfish. I was irritated. I was, and I can fall into that, faster than I would ever like, but it's a really slow burn to get to that place. And so mindfulness and meditation practices.
A quote or mantra that inspires you?
I've been thinking about this quote a lot lately. Everything you need is already inside you. And I say it to myself a lot. I say it as a first principle to people. I believe
That's
it.
So good.
Everything you need is already inside you for this moment. Now, it doesn't mean you don't need food and you don't need, liquids. That's not what I'm saying, right? But everything you need is already inside you. So when I'm speaking or working with somebody, I'm working from that assumption. It's already in there. How can we knock the calcium off of that pure stuff that's already in there? So that's one.
What does mastery mean to you?
Artfully carving a great life. Artfully creating a great life. And it begs the question, like, what is a great life? That's to be determined by each person. But you and I have the ability to shape and co-create the way that we want to show up in moments, this moment and this and this and this. And so mastery is having all of the requisite skills to artistically co-create and shape the life that is defined as being a great one.
And our time here is so limited. It goes by in a flash.
I appreciate you for this time that we spent, and also the long arc of life. We don't know. This is not a bummer. When I say goodbye to you, I'll just kind of lead with the end of the joke, is that I'm going to say goodbye and not know if I'll ever see you again.
Yeah.
It's a way for me to practice being more connected to my relationships and my engagement. So we don't know. We don't know when this thing ends.
Yeah. I mean, it's 10 years since we were back in person. We've been doing this remotely for the last 5 years.
It's wild. I know. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. Like I said, I'd rather spend 3 more hours here with you, but it's always a privilege and an honor to spend time with you. You're an amazing friend.
Thank you, man.
You're an amazing teacher to so many of us. And I hope to infuse to our community really through these conversations how they can get better at driving their business, but also their lives in a better way, right? We have all these leaders out there that are stressed. It's a tough time out there in business, even for the good. Mm-hmm. For those that are doing well, it's still very stressful.
Yeah, there's lots of stress, and I agree. And I want to say thank you for, I love how you show up consistently in my feed with this energy and this laughter. It's right there. I believe that you are working from this place of abundance, that there's so much good that we can do together. Let's keep co-creating what that could. And so thank you for the energy that I get to feel from you on a regular basis of your feed. And it's just a really nice way to engage
I
with
love
you.
Bringing you to this community.
Yeah, man.
Because
awesome.
it's a core component of what you've done and what you're continuing to do. And so I hope to bring you along more often.
Yeah, that's fun, man.
Bring you in the room, have you participate in some fashion and form in the future. And of course, I'd love to come here and have you come to Boca to our studio
fantastic.
as well in the
fantastic.
future. So, and I want to thank all of our viewers, our listeners, and an incredible community that we're creating, the Ultimate Partner community, for viewing us today, for listening today. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. You get the subscribe button on either Apple, Spotify, and if you're watching on YouTube, there's this little subscribe button, as we all know. And if you'd like more information about our events, our community, you can go to theultimateguidetopartnering.com to find out more. And so I want to thank you, Michael. I want to thank our audience. Thank you for following and listening to this episode, this amazing episode of The Ultimate Guide to Partnering.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Ultimate Guide to Partnering. Hopefully this episode and all the episodes we've recorded are helping you better align your partner strategy to achieve your greatest results. So I want to ask you something. Have you implemented everything you've been learning? And are you now achieving the growth and revenue objectives that you hope to achieve? If not, it's time to take action now. Join Ultimate Partner Experience. We're building the community I've always dreamed about. With UPX, you get access to exclusive industry insights, unparalleled networking opportunities, tons of educational resources, and support from a community that shares your goals. Join us now. Visit our website, theultimatepartner.com, and sign up today.